Hello, guys. I hope everyone's doing safe. On today's lecture, we're going to continue with our assignments. But before we do that, I would like to start off with a few of the questions that were emailed to me. I had a couple questions, one regarding the flow along surface command, another one regarding just text, and another one regarding dimensions. So let's start with the flow along surface, and let's see the problem, and then we'll find the solution, and then we'll explain why that happened. So the question was, I'm applying the command, following all the directions, and it seems to be failing when I apply it to the target surface. So now, as you can see here, if you follow my mouse, on the front face of our pavilion in here, I'm going to enable the surface. You can see that um, the flow along object goes on the inside of our surface. And then if you spin the model around and you look at the model, look at the panel on the other side, you can see that it actually flows along on the outside. So one end is on the inside and the other end is on the outside. And the question was why that is happening. And simple answer is there's an issue with um, your base plane that you're using. Now, this is the base plane that uh, this student was using to flow along to the target surface. Now, as you can see, I changed the color of the plane so that you could see the difference. When I select this plane, you can see that one end is on the underside of the panel. The other corner is on the other underside of the panel as well, whereas the other two corners are on the upper side of the panel. So now what Rhino is doing, Rhino is interpreting this as the correct uh, plane to use, and then it's extrapolating to the target plane. That's why you're getting this result in here that we explained. Now, let me delete this one, and I made a copy here. You can see that it's just a copy of the panel. Um, and one thing to point out is probably this happened because you were working in plan view and you were trying to generate the plane in plan view, and sometimes the plane snaps to the top or to the bottom. It's hard to know where it's going to snap to if you don't have the project um, option enabled. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to regenerate this base plane, but I'm going to do it in 3D so that we can see that it's snapping to the correct place. So in our toolbar on the left-hand side, we're going to click this icon, which is going to generate a plane from a collection of points. So we're going to click that. And we're going to make sure that we only snap to the bottom. Snap to the bottom. And if you can't see it, while you're in this command, you can also enable ghosted, and you can just snap to the bottom of that. And once we have the 4 points, it's going to generate this plane. I'm just going to change the color to blue so that you can see the difference. This is our plane. If at any point this is rotating out of proportion, you can always select the object that you want to focus on, and then just type ZS for zoom selected, and now you can just orbit around it. But to explain this even further, now we can see that the plane is housed right at the bottom. Now, if we run the flow along surface command, let's select my object, hit enter, select my base surface, and then I'm going to select my target surface. And now you can see that in this end, and let me soon select it. Now you can see that in this end, The panel is on the outside of the surface, and if we rotate the model, we can see that um, the panel is on the outside on the other side as well. So that's the problem that this student was having. So minor fix, we can just uh, fix the plane, the base plane, and apply the command flow along surface through all our model, and we should be good. So that's one question. The other question was in regards to um, when we are doing um, annotations and lines. The question was, how do we make a line or a leader with two arrows? And the answer is you can't do a leader with two arrows because leader are just for pointing out notes. But you can do an arrow head on a line on two places. So I'm just gonna make a line and run my arrowhead command, select one end, run my command again, and then select the other end. So that's how you would do a line with two arrowheads. Just stay away from using the leader just because the leader is more for, calling out objects when you're using text nodes, just like we do in the construction documents. Another thing that I just want to point out is when you're doing these curves in here, you can actually use, I didn't mention this because I left it open to you guys, but you can actually use one of the commands that we start learning at the beginning of this Pavilion, which is the Interpolate Curve through points. And you can just select the endpoints of your grid that you have there. That's going to give you a smoother curve in here rather than trying to eyeball it. We know for sure that if we trace the endpoints of those, it's going to follow the same curvature or as close as possible to the curvature of our pavilion. And after that's done, we can just do arrowhead and pick the two sides of the line, and you should get something like that. As far as the last question that I had, the question was, I'm having some issues with my dimensions. And I'm going to make a dimension here just to explain the problem that this student was having. It really doesn't matter what dimension we pick right now. So I'm just trying to make it perpendicular. Okay, so we have a dimension right there. And what this student was experiencing is that all the dimensions were coming out as inches in a decimal format. And the way to fix that is by modifying our properties of our dimensions. And to do that, we go into this gear that we have here. And you can find this button by going into the standard tab. And it's all the way to the right of that tab. We're going to find the gear. We click that gear and it's going to display all of our options. Now mine is going to right to where the problem is just because I did it before, but yours might show up in something like this. If you go into the Annotation Styles in here, and you can see that the one that has the checked dot in here, foot architectural, that's my current one. That's the one that is my default when I start a dimension. If I expand this drop-down arrow for my annotation styles, you can see that we have the same names that we have on the right. We have them on the left-hand side list. So I'm just going to click the foot, inch, architectural. And what that's going to do, that's going to display our settings for that specific foot, inch, architectural dimension style. After we do that, we have a couple more options in here that we need to modify. We have the text options, the font, what kind of font you want to use, what type of arrows And then you can see that we have one that says length units. If you click this, it's going to expand and it's going to show you the unit format that you have currently. Currently, we have a feet format, and that's going to be displayed in feet and inches. And you can see if you follow my mouse right here, it's going to display a preview of what that format is. If we choose feet decimal, it's going to show feet, and the inches are going to be in decimal after the dot. And if we only have inches decimal, it's going to just round up the entire, I'm sorry, not round up, but it's going to display the total amount of inches with a decimal format if you have like an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch. So I'm going to just put it in inches decimal, and I'm going to hit OK. So you can see that now we have 20 inches dot 00 because we switch it to a decimal format. So I'm going to go back, and in order to change it from a decimal format into the one that we always use, we're going to switch it to feet, and inches. And the resolution is going to be a quarter of an inch. And we don't need a zero suppression in this one. So we're just going to say apply. And that goes back to the 1 foot, 8 inches typical units that we've been using so far. So those were the 3 questions, fairly simple, nothing to worry about if you submitted this assignment with these things. These are minor things, but I wanted to cover them before we started assignment 9. So let me pause this, and then we'll continue, and then we'll start the assignment 9. Okay, so what is assignment 9? And assignment 9 is going to be, we're going to show up a few new terms to complete the assignment, but we're going to use the flow along surface again, and we're going to use a new command called cage edit to create the outer skin of our pavilion. As you can see here, my screen, on the previous assignment, we cover how to do these panels that are metal panels that were on top of our rafter structure. On this assignment, what we're gonna do the outer skin, which lays on top of the previous panels that we did. And that outer skin is going to be a collection of sub panels that we have arrayed a certain way. And the way that we're going to array them is going to be based on the following sketch. If you follow my mouse in here, the sketch has 19 units. So that means that there's 19 panels that are the same exact panels by 10 units, which are 10 panels that are the same. So it's a 19 by 10, and then we're just gonna populate that 19 by 10 into a big rectangle, and we're gonna take a few panels out, and we're doing that so that we have some areas where we can see inside into the rafters and the metal panels that we have going on in there. So this sketch, try to follow it as close as possible. You can always count how many panels we take out by just looking at the ones surrounding this area in here. The way that this looks, this is just a hatch pattern that I threw in here, diagonal up at 45 degrees. The spacing, I'm not too concerned, but I do want to see this hatch just so that we know that those panels, we're going to take those panels out. We're going to talk in the tutorial how to do it, but what we need to do before we start laying out our grid with the 19 by 10 units, what we need to do is create this panel, which is a sub panel that I was just talking about, create a singular one, and then modify it a certain way, which we'll talk about it when I'm doing the sub panel. And once this panel has been done and created, we can populate it with our 19 by 10. After we do that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna use Cage Edit to the collection of our panels that we have up here. And we're gonna use Cage Edit in all of the panels to reproduce this effect, the effect of one panel, a few panels being shorter than the other panels that are on the left-hand side that are being higher. So we're going to replicate that effect with Cage Edit. And then after that's done, the last step that we need to do is use our flow along surface command to just take that assembly of subpanels and applying it to our pavilion in here. So I like to talk about it before we do this assignment, just because it helps you figure out what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve before we actually jump into it. Okay, so let's jump back into Rhino and let's start the assignment, assignment 9. Okay, so we have Rhino open. Your file should look something like what I have on my screen. You should have your panel shown in here, the rafters on the bottom, and you can leave those on if you like. You can turn them off. For this step, what we're going to do first, we're going to create that sub panel that we were just talking about. Make sure that you're working on the right layer. The layer is going to be 03.2 skin based on the handout that I gave you. Make sure that you have that as your default layer, and let's create that panel. So what that panel needs to be, and let me pull this to the other screen so you can see. So we're doing this sub panel in here. And this panel is going to be a 2 feet by 2 feet, and it's going to chamfer up in a way that the bottom is going to be 2 by 2, and the top is going to be 4 by 3.5, and this is going to be 6 inches high. So that's what we're trying to do in Rhino. So I'm going to push this to my other screen, and let's do that panel. Okay, so you can work in perspective, or you can work in plan view. It doesn't matter for this one as long as you get the same effect. So I'm going to start with my polyline, and I'm going to make a 2 by 2 first. So I'm going to say 2 by 2 by 2, and then close it. And I forgot to click the last point, so I got a triangle. So let me erase that. You can actually use a square and then just type 2 by 2. This is easier. I never show this, but it's the same result. It's a polyline that just happens to be a square. So you can use that command as well. So we have the bottom part, and what we need to do is extrude it and scale the face, the upper face a certain way so that we have a 3.5 by 4. So we have a couple ways of doing this. We can do it by what I just described, which would be just deforming the faces. We could also do it by lofting it, which I would think it would be a better approach. And let's do it by lofting it. So let's see what happens. Let's create our 4 by 3.5 And we're going to do it in this corner. For, actually this way would be 3.5. And then we go up 4 inches. And then we close it. And just to get in the center, what you could do, just type move, select our little square, and then do it from the center. Make sure you have the center enable. There it is. I do in the mid because I smart track my dimensions, but you can see that now I didn't do it for the big square, so now it's doing it there. And then what we can do is just push it up 6 inches high. So what we could do, we could actually take this blue arrow for our gumball and then just push it up. And before you let go of your left click on your mouse, you can just type 6 inches and hit enter, and you can see that it's going to lock exactly at 6 inches. So this is another way of using the gumball rather than just clicking and dragging and moving it where you think is right. You can move it to precise locations. So I'm going to let go, and then now we know that it's going to be at 6 inches. Okay, so we have the 2 squares in here, and what we need to do is run our left command. We're going to select this outer rectangle, and then we're going to select the little rectangle that is up high, and then we're going to click enter, and you can see that the arrows are showing the direction of our curve, of our polyline. If I would have drawn the little triangle from left to right, this direction would be facing the other way. If that's the case for yours, you can always click on the point and it switches the direction. Just what we're trying to do is trying to keep these 2 arrows facing the same way. So I'm going to hit enter one more time, and now you can see that it's showing you a preview with exactly what we need to do. We're not going to modify anything here, our style or anything like that, because the results that we get, it's actually what we want. We don't want to rebuild the surface or anything like that. So we're just going to click OK, and we get something like this. So now that we have this, what we could do, we need to make a few modifications to this object here, because we would like it to be a solid. So what we're going to do, we're just going to cap it, select our object, and then we're going to hit enter. And what that's going to do, that's just going to create the upper and lower face, and we can see that it's a closed object. How do we know for sure it's a closed object? Well, we have the faces showing it that it's a closed object, but there's also another command, and the command is called WHAT, W-H-A-T, and then we select the object, and it's going to tell you exactly what the object is. For this example, this is a poly surface because it started from a poly line and then we extruded it to be a surface, so therefore it's a poly surface. And then it's going to tell you right here, if you follow my mouse, the geometry is a valid poly surface. That means that it's not colliding with itself and it doesn't have any errors. And it is a closed solid poly surface with 6 surfaces. So right there, it's telling you that yes, it is closed. So I'm gonna hit close in here, and we have this panel created here. Now, because I don't usually delete my guidelines, you can see them there. So I'm just gonna push this to the side just so that we don't select them when we're doing the following things to complete our assignment. So we have the panel, the sub panel. The next task is to array it 19 times to the right and 10 times down. So let's do that first. So let's array it 19 times to the right. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the command that we use on the first part of the semester, which was linear array. or I always get this backwards. It's actually array linear. Okay, array linear. We're going to select the object we want to array, and we're going to hit enter. We would like to have 19 items, and we select the reference point and we select the spacing of it. Now, I didn't went over the sub options of this because we already covered them. I believe there's no point of me covering it again, but if you have any questions, please email me. Okay, so we have the 19 units, and then we're going to select all of them and then run the command once again. And this time we only need 10 units from this point to that point. So right there, we have what our handout is showing us right here. We have our 19 units one way and our 10 units the other way. The next thing is to take out the ones that we don't need. Now, for the purposes of time, I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'll come back once that's done. Okay, so we're back, and you should have something that looks just like this. If you saw me doing it, what I did, I just went around the outline of the void. That makes it easier. And then I just delete the leftover of inside the void. So however way you do it, it doesn't matter as long as it looks similar to mine. I just noticed that I deleted an extra one, so it should look just like that. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do, we need to figure out how to deform all of these panels in a way that is consistent from one end to the other end. And we need to do it in a way that is systematically, meaning that there's a system in which we figure out the heights of our sub panels. And the way we do that is by using a command that is called cage edit. Now, before I do it in our sub panels, I open another session of Rhino, and I would like to explain what the command does before we actually apply it to our sub panels. And I think this is going to make it a little bit more clear to you guys of what's happening in here. So what I'm doing, I'm just doing a sphere in here. And let me set it to shaded so that you can actually see the sphere. I'm going to put it up. So what we're going to do, the object doesn't matter. What matters is the command that we are using, which is the cage edit. So I'm going to run the command cage edit. And what this command is going to do, this command is going to prompt you for a object. This object is going to be my sphere. I'm going to hit enter. So once I hit enter, what I need to do is look at the sub options that I have in here. we have a couple of options, and I'll run through the different ones that we have here. So I'll start with the bounding box in here, which is the one that we will use for our assignment. So I'm going to click the bounding box. And what that's going to do, it's going to create a box around our object. And if we deform the box, our object is going to deform with it. After clicking the bounding box, you can see that it's going to prompt you for a coordinate system. So what that means is that you can have a specific coordinate system of your box. We're not that advanced in our Rhino skills. So what we're going to do, we're just going to say, I would like to use the world coordinate system, which is the default for everything. So we're just going to say world. After we do that, notice that the box hasn't appeared yet. And the box is going to appear once we finish all the sub-option prompts that we have going on in the command line. Notice that we have X point count, Y point count, Z point count. So think of it as a cube, and the cube is going to have a certain amount of points in the X direction, and those points are then going to be multiplied by the direction of the Y points, and after that, the X, Y points are going to be further multiplied in the Z direction. So it's basically a cube that is full of points. Now, this is important because if you have a lot of points, it's going to make it a little bit harder to pick points to deform your object. The degrees it's dealing with the amount of curvature that you're applying to your object. For us, 3 is enough. If you decrease this, your surface might become a little bit tessellated. So that applies to the X degree, Y degree, and Z degree. So we're going to leave it at the default to 3 for all of them. We are going to change the X point count. We're just going to start simple and then just say 2. Actually, let's say 3. The Y point, we're going to say 3 as well. And then the Z point, we're just going to say 2, just so that we can have some difference. And then we're going to hit enter one time. And then we're going to hit the region to edit. Global is fine, so we're just going to hit enter one more time. And after we're done with all the command prompts, now you see that there's a box that contains points inside the box. Let me switch this to ghosted so that you could see that there's one more point in there. We can't see it because of the sphere. So we're just going to put it in wireframe. And we don't have a point there. And the reason why is because we only picked 2 points in our Z direction. So notice that we have our X points, which are going to be the red color of the line. So this is 1, 2, 3 points, which we did pick 3 points. Our Y direction is going to be 3 points as well, 1, 2, 3. And then our Y direction only has 2 because this counts as 1. And then the upper one counts as another one. So that's 2 points right there. So that's why we don't have one in the middle. So let me start by selecting points and then just moving them around. Let me switch this back to ghosted so you can see what's happening. Notice that when I start moving these points, I start deforming my geometry. And I do it not by deforming the geometry itself, but rather by moving the points around to deform my my geometry. And this is where the gumball is pretty good to use because you can just eyeball what is it that you want to create. In this instance, I'm just trying to make a pebble, uh, uh, a pebble object that is just a little bit deformed. Okay, so we have something like that. And I'm going to hit escape one time and escape one more time. And notice that uh, the object is here. We can copy it, and then we can start working with this copied object. But if we select the object and move the object, notice that Rhino is going to tell us that dragging release one object from its cage. That means that these two are connected, and if you move one or the other one, uh, it's going to lose its relationship to the other object. So I'm going to hit cancel, and it's going to move back. If you want to move something which is cage edit, just select two of them, and then you can move it around. Now, let's say that you took the time to modify the points, and you have an object, but you want to further refine your points after you exit the command. Now, you don't need to run the command again because it's going to create yet another cage edit. What you need to do instead is select the box and go into your toolbar on the left. And you're going to see that there is show curve edit points. If we click that, I believe is the one right next to it. Sorry for that. It's going to be the show object control points. So if we select the box and then select the one that has the points outside of the curve, because those are control points. The ones that are in the curve, those are points in the curve. The ones that are outside the curve are going to be control points, which are the ones that we're using for deforming this box in here. So we're going to click this one. And now you have your points back, and you can just select them again and then start moving them around. And then your object is going to further the form based on what you're doing. You can even bring them closer as well to one another, and just beware if you start doing that, because you might get some surfaces that start colliding with itself. So you should get something like this. So I'm going to hit escape, and we have our cage edit, which is this. So this is what we're going to use to deform all of our objects. Now you can use it in a single object, and you can use it in a collection of objects, which is what we're going to do. But before we do that, let me just show you the other options that we have for the cage edit command. So I'm just going to do the cone in here, and I'm going to run the cage edit. I'm going to select my object. Now, rather than applying the bounding box, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the line. And what Rhino is going to do is going to prompt me for a beginning point and an end point. After you do that, the line is going to disappear. But if you follow your prompts, you're going to see that it's asking you the degree and the point count on that line. I'm going to leave it at 4, and I'm going to leave it at the degree that it's on, which is 3. So I'm going to hit enter one time. A region to edit, I'm going to hit enter one more time. Global is the one that we're using. So I'm going to hit enter, and notice that we have a line here, and then we have the points. Now, it's the same process in here. If we start moving the points around, you're going to see that the object is going to get deformed around this specific line. Now, this one is a little bit of less intuitive, right? Because we're just moving the line, and we're hoping that we're moving it in the right spot, because you can see that there's some surfaces that are intersecting one another. So this one, it's great if you have let's say a rectangle, cube, something that is very orthogonal. And better yet, let's delete these two and let's make a box just so that you see what I'm trying to explain. So I'm going to run cage edit, select the object, say line, and we're going to keep the same degrees, same point count. And then when I move this, you can see that it almost starts bending right there. So that would be one purpose of using the line. So let's keep going with the next one. So I'm just drawing solids so that I could explain the cage edit command better. I'm going to select the object and then I'm going to say rectangle. And I'm going to select a rectangle and it's going to prompt me for a U point and a V point. Now, U point and V points are going to be UV coordinates. So pretty much surfaces get their own set of coordinates. U would be X and V would be Y. So it's the same concept. So X points would be 4 and Y points would be 4. So I would get a 4x4 grid. I'm going to hit enter. Enter one more time, and then you can see that I got all those points in there. And you can start modifying your points. So these are less controllable, but at the same time, you can start getting some cool results if you spend some time trying to deform it. So those are the basics for cage edit. And you're welcome to play around with all the different settings in there. But what we're going to use the cage edit just because we can control it a little bit better. And that works really well with what we're trying to do. So I'm going to minimize this or close this, doesn't matter. And I'm going to jump back into our sub panels that we have. Now, when you're doing this, it's a good idea to make copies of the things that you're deforming, just in case that something doesn't work. You can always go back to the original state. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just making a copy here. And actually, let's move these guys out of the way, just because when we start moving the points, they might be on the way of things. So I'm going to move it all the way there. These are the ones that we're going to deform just so that we know. I'm going to draw a big rectangle saying this is our work area. You don't have to do this if you're comfortable with the area that you work with. So it's really up to you. It doesn't matter. It works for me. But let's see what happens. Okay, so we have all our panels, and what we need to do is select all of our panels and run the command cage edit. And we're going to pick bounding box because we want a box around all of our objects. We would like a world coordinate system because it's the default. The X point and X count, as I stated before, try to keep it minimal. I'm going to keep it at 4 by 4 by 3, just so that we get points in the middle. The degree is going to be 3, 3, and Z it's set at 2. Let's keep it at 3. And then we're going to hit enter. And then region to edit, this is just asking you, this is pretty much running this show object control points, which since we are on the bounding box that we are currently doing, it's going to turn the one that we just specified. So if you hit enter, it should just show you the points. Okay, so we got the points, and this works better if you switch to a orthographic left or right or front. You can see that we have all the points in there. I'm going to turn off a few things just because we have, this is what I was talking about. We have some objects that are in there on the way. So let me just try to turn a few things off. Rafters. Okay, so now that we turn these off, we should be looking right to the front because we want to modify. We would like to modify. Let's bring the assignment. We would like to modify the front of it in a way that it curves from small to big. And when I say front, I mean the front of the collection of these panels in here. So this is the front if you follow my mouse. So that's why we went to the front view in here. So front view, which is right here. And we still have the points on. I'm just going to maximize this. We still have the points in there. So I'm going to start selecting the points. I'm going to say the 3 in there. Start picking them up. Depending on your machine, this command takes a lot of memory, so it might take a while if you have a slow machine. Sometimes when you do crazy geometry, it does the same thing. Even if you have a fast computer, it takes a while because it has to calculate the deformations. So notice I'm just pulling up the 3 top points. And then for the last ones, I'm just pushing them down, pretty much condensing them into one another, almost into one another. That's a good thing that I should mention. If you have a point here, let's say this point, the one that I just selected, it's in the middle between these 2 points. Don't push it away in a way that it goes beyond this range of the 2 points, because you're going to start getting the surfaces to intersect with one another. So just keep the bounds keep the bounds closer to one another, but don't just go beyond the range. And the reason why we're doing it in the front view is because when I'm selecting all these points, I'm not just selecting the one on the top. If I go back to my perspective, you can see that I'm selecting the entire row that it happens to be on the top. That's why we went to the front view. Now, this would be enough for our tutorial for assignment 9, but I would like to open this assignment in a way that you can actually take more time and you can experiment with the cage edit. So you could start deforming it even further. Just don't go too crazy, because once we flow along the surface, it might take some time. You can see that I'm just pushing things up or down, trying to keep it a little bit consistent. And that looks good to me. Like I said, if you feel like you want to experiment by using this command and then moving the points around even further, please do so. Just make sure that you save before you do it. Otherwise, it might crash. Like I said before, this command takes a lot of your computer resources. So I have something like this, and I think I believe this is good enough for me. Like I said, you could experiment if you feel like doing it. The only thing that I do ask you is that if you experiment, make sure that this line in here, that line reflects the movements that you did. For example, if you push the middle area up and this area down, just make sure that this line reflects how you move around it. That's something really important because we just want to show what we're trying to do with that line. So keep an eye on that. I'll be checking that. So that's Cage Edit in a nutshell. Now we can delete this, and the next thing that we can that we're going to do is take all of these Cage Edit objects and apply them to our surface. Okay, so let's apply it to our main pavilion, and let me turn off the layers that I turned off when I was working in the sub panels. So I'm going to turn off all the 0, 3 tiles just so that you could see that we have the subsurface and the panels that are on top of it. Now for flowing this into the pavilion, if we do it by just using the individual surfaces of the panels, we're going to get this collection of objects jam into each one of the panels, and that's something we don't want to do it. We don't want to do because this entire scheme has to flow along the entire pavilion. So what we need to do is get the surface that runs all the way there. Now, if you delete it in your file, you have to regenerate it again by lofting or making the two profile sweep that we did in assignment 1. But if you just turn off the layers, we can turn off the surface, and it should be right there. You can see that mine is right there. So all I need to do for this one, I just need to extract the surface from the top, just like we did on the previous assignment. So extract surface. I'm going to pick this surface, which is the one that I want, and mine. Okay. Mine, it has 2 for some reason. I just don't know why. Okay, so I combined mine into 2 by joining them. It might work. It might not work. We'll give it a try, see what happens. If it doesn't work, we have to reloft it. But this is just me. I remember I sliced my surface right in there. That's why mine is like that. But yours, if you've been following along since the beginning, yours should be fine. You shouldn't have to reloft it. So I'm going to move this. First of all, I'm going to move that to my skin. Or better yet, to keep things organized, we have the surface guide. We're going to rename that surface guide for panels. And then we're going to create another one, 0, 3.1, because it's the same thing. And we're just going to call it surface guide for outer skin. Enter. And we'll give it another color, maybe orange. Okay. And let's move that surface into our surface guide for outer skin. So change object layers. Okay, and now let's just turn that off, the main surface from assignment 1. But before we do that, let's just move it to the right place. Move the outer skin surface to endpoint right there. Now we can turn that off, and we should get something like that. Okay, So we have the surface that is going to be our target surface. Now we need to create another, just like the previous assignment, we need to create our base surface for the collection of our panels. So let's do it by clicking the surface from points. We're going to click this guy. Make sure that we pick the bottom of our objects. And then the bottom of our objects. Bottom. And last one. We should get something like that. Now, this one, it pretty much goes with surface guide for outer skin. So I'm just going to change the layer to that, just so that we can see the voids of that. All right, so let's run the flow along surface, which should be the last step that we do. So flow along surface. We're going to select this entire thing without the base surface and without the cage edit box, and we're going to hit enter. And all of these, oh, it's prompting me for a base surface, which is going to be the orange plane. I'm going to pick this corner. And the target surface, we cover all the sub options on the previous assignment. If you don't remember what to pick, just refer back to the other assignment. We're going to pick this corner in here. Notice how it's picking the one surface that I had split, so it might probably just get all the way up to here. Let's see what it does. Yeah, it did. So it actually did. It actually did it all the way to here. So we need to fix that. Let's say that you're in the same boat that I am, which is we have two surfaces and we need to recreate it. So because I have the underlaying structure, I believe that if you type duplicate etch, we can just extract the main things that we need. But before we do that, we need the intermediate one, which intermediate from assignment 1 was right here. Okay, so let's turn on our groundwork. Okay, so with that layer active, I'm going to select section. I'm going to cut a section of this object through this line. Enter. I'm going to turn off my groundwork. Okay, and now we can run the duplicate etch command, dup etch, and select hit enter. Like that. Let's delete it. Okay, now we have the groundwork curves, and let's join this curve. And if we say what, it says that it has two segments. So I'm going to delete this, bring back groundwork. Now I didn't save my lines, so now I need to bring them back again. So let me pause this and redo this lines, and then I'll just redo my sweep, just so that we get a nice consistent surface. Okay, so I took the time to redo the single surface, and then I offset it. Now we got a clean surface. As you can see, there's no seams in here that was preventing me before to do the flow along surface. And now I'm gonna do extract surface, select my surface, and now you can see it's an entire surface, an entire surface that is from beginning to end, which is what we want. Um, okay, now that we have that, I'm going to delete this one because I don't need it anymore. And I am going to bring back my panels and my structure. It looks a little bit funky just because the surface lays right on the same point on the same area as the other surfaces. That's why you get this view in here, but that's fine. So what we need to do, let me bring back my assignments, and what we need to do is flow along surface. But because the surface that we're using is right, as you can see here, right below our metal panels in here, we need to account for that thickness. So whatever your thickness is for that metal panel that you've done on the previous assignment, mine was uh, mine was 2 inches. So we need to account for that. And the way we do it is by taking our base plane from our cage edit objects and then just moving it down the same amount of the thickness of your metal panels. In my case, it's going to be 2 inches. Notice that now it lays right on top of it. It doesn't touch my base uh, surface, which is fine. And that whenever we do the flow along surface is gonna use this target surface, but it's gonna keep that 2 inch. And by doing that, it's gonna place it right on top of our metal panels. So let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. So let's do flow along surface. Select our objects. Hold Control to deselect the ones that you don't want. Okay, I'm gonna hit Enter. Base surface is gonna be it's gonna be this one. I'm gonna pick this corner right here with where the smallest ones are, and I'm going to pick this corner right here. Oops, wrong one. So this corner right there, and let's see what we get. So you have to experiment with what corner you're selecting. Um, so in my case, They seem to be on the right spot, but the direction of it's a little bit off. Notice that my smaller panels are here, and then my bigger panels are on this side here. What we want to do is have our bigger panels here and our smaller panels right here. So what we need to do is do some trial and error. So we did this corner with this corner. So we're going to try the same corner with the other corner. Let's see what we get. So let's do flow along surface. Base surface is going to be this corner, and we're going to do it to this corner right there. And let's see what we get. Okay, so now it's working. You can see that mine is a little bit off, and that's just because I recreated from a couple of assignments that we did last year. So that's mine. I know it's a little bit off, but it's okay. Yours should be right on point. But you can see smaller panels are on this side as well as this side, and big panels are all the way in the back and all the way in the back right there. So now we can just set this to our skin and then turn off our guides, and we should get something like that. So that is going to be it for assignment 9. Now what you guys need to do is set up the once you finish everything, you need to set up these sheets, set up the sheet with the units, and set up the sheet with the sub panel and its dimensions as well as the height. Don't forget to set up this front view as well with the offset height of your previous panel. And if you modify your cage edit differently, don't forget to update this curvature right here. If you push the middle part up, make sure that you show that up with the curve. And then lastly, we need an isometric or perspective. I'm going to leave that open to you guys because we're going to render it on the next assignment. So for now, we just need a 3D view of it in this assignment. So as a recap, you need to set up 2 sheets. And when you're submitting this, I would like to see all the PDFs that you have created. Now I've been opening your files, and some of them are not set up at all. Looks like you're just adding the previous PDFs that you created on the other assignments. That is really not what we're going after. What we're going after is being able to control our file when we output these PDFs. So I've been opening your file, and I've been seeing that you have not turned off things on or off in your layer. So those things are going to count against you. So please make sure that you fix those issues for the next assignment, and please make sure that you upload, whenever this assignment is due, upload the entire collection of PDFs that we've done so far. Some people are great at doing this. Other people are lacking behind, and please make sure to do that. That's going to count against you. Another thing that I want to mention is that if you need some extra credit, now would be a perfect time to have some extra credit points. And the way we're going to do it is you are going to have to generate 2 more schemes. And remember, this is extra credit. If you don't need extra credit, you don't need to do this part. What you need to do for extra credit is generate 2 schemes of the metal panels and 2 schemes of your outer skin. And when I say 2 schemes, I don't mean by just deforming The cage edit, I mean by creating your own sub panel, and I'm going to leave it open to you. Creating your own sub panel into a form that you want, right? When we started doing this, we just chose the rectangles, but you can pick any shape that you want. Just make sure that you array it the same amount of units, 19 by 10, and then do a cage edit as well. And I want to see two versions of each. I want to see two versions of the metal panel, which is that, right? And it doesn't have to be just this panel with different lines going to different points. It could be any other shape. It could be a lot of squares. It could be hexagons. It could be anything. I need two schemes of each, two schemes of metal panels and two schemes of outer skin. And the way you are going to go about this is for each scheme, you're going to create its own separate layer. So if you have the two schemes, make sure that you name them the same, 3.1 for outer scheme, and then just add what version it is, version 1, version 2. And for me to accept this as extra credit, I need two schemes, not just one, two schemes of each one of those. So that would be for extra credit. As I said before, you don't need to do the extra credit if you're okay in your grades, but if you want to bump up your grade a little bit more, please make use of this extra credit. And as always, if there are any questions, please email me a couple days before, but just don't do it a couple hours before the assignment is due. Email me. I'll try my best to get back to you. I've been keeping up with your assignments, so after this goes online, I should probably have your assignment 8 graded. And as always, please keep safe, and we'll see you guys on the next time.